Oh, hi. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Blackdot Miniatures and Paints. Kevin coming back to you this week. We're trying our hand again at a Dark Angels model in general. This one specifically is an Aggressor. So the main complaint that I've always got about my Dark Angels is they're a little bit too bright. They start to creep into the Salamander territory. So to try and mitigate this a little bit, we're coming through with a mix of Abbadon Black and Caliban Green 1-to-1. We're trying to start our green at a darker point, and as we sit there and go up the highlights towards the brighter colors, we're going to try and work thin. That way it's a just subtle highlight, and we're going to try and limit going all the way up to moot green. So check this one out, see if you can get something useful out of it, and we'll go from there. So after we did the all over coat of the mix, we're coming through with just straight up Caliban green. We're trying to focus this from a top down fashion to make sure that we hit the high points where the model would be the most highlighted, okay? So we're trying to avoid the underside of the power fist, the power armor, anything bottom up. We're trying to specifically focus top down. The one thing that unfortunately always lends it to looking like a salamander being too bright is I watch a lot of the Next Level Painting, the Next Level Painting system. I really like his content. He's a great artist, and unfortunately he really pops out the contrast. With a model that's supposed to be so dark, it can be a little bit problematic sometimes. We'll see if we can fix it this time. Now we mix up Warpstone Glow and Caliban Green. We're also going very thin. Now on the actual film here, it looks like it's incredibly just blown out. It looks like I took it way too far. That's not the case. It ends up matting down as it sits there and dries. So here we're just trying to focus on the final highlight areas, the top of the feet, top of the shoulder pads, helmet, power pack, all of that. So as you look at it right here, it looks extremely bright and looks like I went a step too far. It does chill out, so don't be too afraid of it. If you try this method and it looks too bright, give it a second, let it dry. Always approach your model when it's dry, because these paints will look more vibrant whenever they are still wet. So on to everybody's favorite step, edge highlighting. You haven't heard me complain about this in a while. I'm going to complain about it a little bit because I probably spent a good 45 minutes picking out all the edge highlights here. Now, the reason why edge highlighting is so important in this model is because we are working from a very, very dark model. So we want to make sure that we are, through the edge highlights, causing it to really show itself as green. If you were to not put these edge highlights in there, unfortunately it can show as almost a black, just very flat, doesn't have a lot of vibrancy, contrast, doesn't really do anything interesting. So as much as I am not a fan of edge highlighting, if you are going to try and do a darker model in this method, unfortunately it's a necessary step along the way. The biggest thing is just to make sure that you dilute your paints to the proper consistency. The well where the hair is should hold enough paint that you can get a couple good lines down before having to re-dip into the paint. If you find yourself having to constantly dip into the paint, or whenever you're sitting there trying to lay down a line, you have to dip multiple times for the same line, more than likely your paint is too thick, so just thin it down a little bit. Just take your time, get a steady hand, work slowly, and you will get a result that you're looking for with this. Edge highlighting isn't hard, it's just tedious, and if you mess it up, it can have really dramatic effects. So as you can see after that, this really gave it an awesome effect. It was a lot of work, it was a lot of time spent into it. This is more so a character model. I would not spend near this time working on a just infantry troop, but with this being an aggressor, with it being a model that's got a little bit of ass behind it, it's not going to go down instantly and be cannon fodder. I'm okay with spending this amount of time in there. So to pick out all of our metals, we come through with Scale 75's Thrash Metal. To be fair, this was a little bit brighter than what I'm used to. Typically we come through with the normal lead belcher workup, but I have found through testing this on several models and several different paint jobs that this Thrash Metal is very, very good. It gives you a very consistent one coat regardless of the color that it goes over, and it takes the highlights, the washes, everything very well. So if you want to try and darken this down, they've got several paints in their paint range that can also be a little bit darker metal, or you can just add a little bit of black to this. Once we washed this down, it did give the effect that we were looking for. Turned out great, so don't worry about it too much. With this being a flamethrower that he's got for his primary weapons on his hands, for some reason it just screamed out to me, hey, let's paint these hoses red. I think it's because red and green are opposites on the color wheel. They pop in contrast very, very well. So we go through, we just pick out all these hoses leading up to his flamethrowers, make sure that they hit a nice opaque layer. For the Aquila on his chest, we're coming through in true Dark Angels fashion and just painting this up with Zandri Dust. It's going to be a nice tan color. It plays off very well from the green power armor that we've already established. Just be careful here, steady your hands. It's a nice open available surface, so it should not be too difficult to get to, but obviously we want to be very careful not to jack up what we've got going on, because right now we've got a very nice power armor effect. If we hit this with just the wrong brush stroke of Zandri Dust, we just hit the reset button and really jack this thing up. When you're working with the airbrush, unfortunately, that is a risk you take. Now this model's only got a little bit of gold on him, just the reliquary box on the front of him, and then he's also got a scroll beside it. Unfortunately, when I was painting it, I just blotched out that whole thing in gold. I didn't realize what it was at the time. We ended up fixing the scroll work later with Zandri Dust, so checking box art is always a beneficial thing. Make sure you get 2 layers with your Retributer Armor if you need it, get a nice opaque coverage, and then we can move on to the next color, which is going to be Screamer Pink. For this, all we're doing is picking out the ropes that are running across the front of the crotch of the power armor. Easy enough to get to, again working with a nice tip on the brush. I found these scale 75 brushes at Goldmine over in Richmond, and even though these are synthetic brushes, this really has become my workhorse. So if you're looking at getting new brushes, these scale 75 ones are fan-freaking-tastic, and they're like $7 a brush. They're very, very reasonable. While I was looking at it, I noticed the joints in the power armor were a little bit green, so just go through if you need to and blotch those out with the Abbadon Black, a nice power armor joint color, whatever color you would use for yours. Some people use silver. We come through with Bugmans Glow for the face. I'm still half and half on this. I know you guys have said no, you need to use Bugmans Glow. It gives you a very nice effect. It gives you a very nice face. I've heard other guys like me that say no, just use Cadian Fleshtone. On this face, it worked like a champ. It worked very well, and these aggressors make me become a believer in that. After I apply that Bugmans Glow, I just come through with Cadian Fleshtone, start working up towards the highlight. This is a thinner paint to begin with, and then I thinned it down as well because I do want to have a smooth transition from the deepest shadows to the highest points. Now, you don't have to be super worried about these transitions here because we do shade over them. If your paint is not quite opaque, know that we are putting several layers on top of it, and those will fill in the gaps for you. Now, like I was talking about earlier, this Thrash Metal, it takes these washes so well. I mean, you do still have to watch for the pooling. I think that's true with any paint on any range anywhere. Make sure you don't let your Nuln Oil or wash pull up on the surface. But after that, this is like butter to bread. It just goes together very smoothly, very well. So get a nice applied coat all over your Thrash Metal, Lead Belcher, whatever color it is you're using for these. Unfortunately, I know Scale 75 can be a little bit difficult to find and get unless you're ordering it online. I was talking to my local game store the other day, and apparently Scale 75 has exclusive contracts to the sale of their paint. It's not just available on the typical distribution sites available to the store, so that's why they're so difficult to get. Next we come through with Serephin Sepia. We're just making sure to hit the Aquila on his chest, starting the process of where we're going to paint this towards, letting that dry up. We come through with Reikland Fleshshade across the gold as well as the face. This is why I was saying not to be too worried about the transition between Bugmans and Cadian Fleshtone. This wash will really help to mend the gaps in between. We move back to Cadian Fleshtone, and then we start picking this up where the shade shaded down too much of the highlight, bringing it back to the base tone that we were looking for. The biggest thing here is to avoid any of the surfaces lower on his face that would be hiding the shadows, hiding the light, and make sure you pick up any sort of highlighted areas, the eyebrows, the frown lines, stuff like that. Next we come through with Emperor's Children. All we're trying to do here is hit the tops of the nodules on each one of the parts of the rope. Working with a very small brush here is the biggest trick. I know a lot of guys go, man, I can't paint that small. Those details are 0.5 millimeter. How do you paint that? You just use a nice small brush with a nice tip on it. That's the trick. We mix up Cadian Fleshtone and Scale 75's Pale Flesh 1:1. We're just continuing the progression of the highlighting of the face. So if we did 100% of the Cadian Fleshtone, we come through with this mix, we do about 60% of it, and progressively work that up towards the highest highlight. We'll come through with Pale Flesh finally. Here we're just essentially putting down dots. We're just dabbing little spots onto his eyebrow, on the frown lines on top of his head, focusing that highlight towards the very, very top of his head where the light would essentially be most intense. All you're really doing with all of this painting is trying to play to where the light would be the most intense. Now don't be like me on this one. I should have taken this back to a Zandri Dust, left the recess shade going, and then started to this highlight. Unfortunately, I just didn't think about it, didn't do it. So here we're coming through with Ushabti Bone. We're just trying to pick up the tops of each feather on the Aquila on his chest. We're trying to leave the Serephin Sepia shade in each one of the recesses, and then we're just going to the other side of that recess, running a small slashing line across the tips, the tops, the sharpest points where that Aquila essentially gets hit by the sun again. Now after the Reikland Fleshshade dried on the gold, we come back through with Retributer Armor again. All we're doing is trying to reinvigorate the color that we shaded down and dulled down with the Reikland Fleshshade. Unfortunately, I don't have the gloss version of this wash. I've never really super needed it, so we just have to reinvigorate that color. We come through with Scale 75's Heavy Metal. This is what we're using for all of the highlighting on our previously washed down Thrash Metal. To this color's credit, this is really a good color. It highlights the metals very well without leaving very staunch and just plain to see across the room highlight marks, paint strokes on here. So again, I know I'm preaching about Scale 75 here lately. If you can get it, I recommend the crap out of it. If you're looking for just a different couple paints to throw in there, they sell them individually, they sell them in packs. It's a great paint. Just at least try it, look into it, okay? Well, let's go ahead and check out the big reveal, see how this guy turned out. Alright guys, so here's the finished product. I think it turned out awesome. I'm a fan of my work, obviously, but I think it did turn out to the dark Angels green that I've been trying to be in the pursuit of. Be honest with you, I'm not as much of a fan of it as with my high contrasty normal Dark Angels I do. However, it was interesting to try and step outside the wheelhouse, try something a little bit different. Again, I think this model turned out really good. I'm super happy with it. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Check out my other Dark Angels videos, see how they look, see how this one looks. Let me know what you prefer. If you found anything useful in this video, guys, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, share it to someone who may be starting a Dark Angels army. That's my goal, was to just try and help somebody find a way to paint their models the way they want them to be and give them the skills to do that. So until next time, we'll catch y'all then. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.